The following program is intended for mature audiences.
What's up? Hey, everybody. Hey, everyone. It is July 11th, Friday. Happy Friday. I don't know what happened here. More tech problems. All right, so a year after Trump's assassins are, well, their motive is still unknown, and their connections with others, it's not a conspiracy because they're lone wolves, is still unexplained, unknown. The origins of the assassination attempt are still unknown. We know that Ryan Ruth planned it for more than a year, so thanks for joining me today. So as I mentioned yesterday, and people weren't really paying attention, that Trump is doubling down on tariffs once again. He's using it as a diplomatic tool, and now the rest of the mainstream media is catching up to what I said yesterday and how important it is, not just to the markets, but to the overall health of the U.S. economy. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And other news coming up. Hopefully, there are not going to be any more issues. That's why I got a little late start today. I got to have some technical issues as I normally have. They are ghosts in the machine this morning and really ever since Tuesday. So it seems like the stream is up and running. So let's get into the news for today, Friday, July 11th. I'm going to start out with the Wall Street Journal. Trump doubles down on using tariffs as a tool of American power. President uses levies to cajole nations on political priorities, many unrelated to trade, according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, they don't want to have this headline because then they're going to have to realize the fact that tariffs don't cause inflation. The people that said that were definitely misinformed or were sleeping during Econ 101. Tariffs don't cause inflation. Now, can tariffs raise prices on consumers? Yes, but not necessarily. A lot of times the middlemen, the importers, the exporters, they all eat the extra cost. Because as we know with supply and demand, if you start raising prices on consumers, they might go to other producers or what have you, or stop buying the product altogether. So we're going to move along a little bit here. You're going to have to excuse it. I'm a little not unprepared, just was dealing with some technical issues, and I have some other issues this morning. But please, I want to take this opportunity to ask you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast, share the clips, leave a comment. All right, let's move on to the second headline from the New York Times. Breaking news this morning, Trump threatens higher tariffs on Canada in the middle of trade talks. The president revived his discredited claims about fentanyl entering the U.S. from Canada. And this is to justify his latest proposed rate of 35%. Now, what I want to add here is that the New York Times says discredited claims. I might as well say debunked or whatever. Claims they don't like, and they don't like the proof of claims. Let me say this. that the Mexican border is effectively shut down. All fentanyl, and I've just watched the latest Tucker Carlson interview with a main journalist talking about the illegal Chinese communist pot growing farms all over Maine. And you have to understand, with the southern border being closed, and we just had the recent report of the communists, a credible report of the communists and Mexican narco traffickers teaming up to produce and distribute fentanyl in the United States. So the Chinese communists are all over the friggin' place in all industries, in all levels of government, state, local, municipal, and federal. And they have their hands in everything. Not only that, but they, if you're online, and most of you are, if you're even listening to this, they're everywhere online. If you start putting out stuff against the Chinese communists or whatever, you're going to be throttled. It's the same thing with the CIA, which I think that the CIA, the elites, and the Communist Party are all working together, but that's a story for another time. Also from the Wall Street Journal, Trump's unsung economic booster, deregulation. Nuclear power exemplifies how revamping dated and onerous rules could kickstart investment and innovation. Next headline is from the AP. State Department is firing over 1,300 employees under Trump administration plan. Also from the Wall Street Journal. Well, let's go back to this AP article just for a second here. Okay. So the AP says State Department is firing over 1,300 employees under the Trump administration plan. I didn't want to get into the article because it is a tearjerker of a story regarding 1,300 federal government employees. Who cares about government employees? You had your fun. Now it's time to go. Now, they don't even, again, with the reporting, whether it's the New York Times, that doesn't justify their reporting in the fact that Trump threatens higher tariffs on Canada in the middle of trade talks and discredited claims about fentanyl coming in from the northern border. If you looked into I'm not going to show it to you here, but if you looked into the whole article, they don't discredit the claim at all about fentanyl coming in from the Canadian border. What they do say is they quote the Canadians as saying a lot has been done to stem the tide of fentanyl coming in from Canada. So the Canadians are saying that they have and have proven to have stemmed or at least slow the flow of fentanyl coming in, citing seizures and whatnot. Fentanyl coming in from Canada into the United States. But the New York Times says that is a discredited claim about fentanyl entering the U.S. from Canada. Well, how could Canada stem the tide of fentanyl coming into the U.S. from Canada if it hasn't been? And they cite seizures. So what the fuck is the New York Times talking about? It's like this AP article. State Department is firing over 1,300 employees under Trump administration plan. In this AP article, they don't mention the recent Supreme Court decision that says that Trump, as the executive, has the right to fire any federal employee. Just like if you work for a company and you accidentally knock the CEO down the stairs or spill his coffee or whatever, and he fires you, you can't say he doesn't have the right to do so. He's head of the company. So the State Department is firing 1,300 employees directed by Donald Trump. Marco Rubio decides who to fire, and they go and fire it. And the reason they've been fighting this is because the liberal bureaucratic deep state has put down roots in, just like the Chinese do, in every aspect of government to fight exactly what Trump is doing, which is returning the power of the government from the elites who put all these people into power, whether they know it or not. They just have to take an oath. And people get mad at Trump for wanting loyalty. Well, I'd rather people in the administration be loyal to Trump and his agenda than loyal to this amorphous deep state. All right, let's go to this next article from the Wall Street Journal. Trump threatens GOP senators over vote on DOGE cuts. President emphasizes defunding public broadcasting as lawmakers raise concerns. It's not just about public broadcasting. They're called rescissions. What wasn't in the budget bill is now being put forth in rescission bills that are going to make DOGE cuts law, as they should be. So they're not executive actions that can be easily undone by an incoming liberal administration. What the problem is that politicians get kickbacks from spending. The more spending there is, the more money that comes back around, either in campaign financing or direct gifts, which is harder to do. The point is, the DOGE cuts costs haven't been realized and won't be realized for another couple of years. So it's important to make sure that these cuts are indeed codified in law. All right, let's get to the main story here. So we're going to talk about the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Now, the reasoning behind the assassination attempts is, my reasoning, my speculation, is, as is with everything, it's a broader conspiracy. This idea of lone wolves, I'm not saying lone wolves don't exist. But the reality is that even if they appear to be lone wolves, that how do the people, what hasn't been discovered is how these people, whether it's a mass shooting or assassination attempt, how these people are all fit a profile, young and isolated, males for the most part, or wannabe males. And this never really started until the advent of the internet. My speculation is that these people are psychotic for one reason or another, either because they're taking pharmaceuticals or they just are naturally, but they're isolated and lonely. And so if all of a sudden you online in the chat, you go, "Hi, my name's Ben. I'm with the CIA. We need to get Trump," or do whatever, or you need to go, or they listen to you and then, they give you feedback that is indicative of nurturing you into action. That's my point. Now, this is a tale of two assassins, starkly different from one another. But let's go into some of the headlines here first. Washington Times. Butler, 1 year since the assassination attempt on Trump in Butler, the American people don't have answers. What are the answers? Well, answers to the questions of motive and origin. And it hasn't really been, they haven't really seemed with mass shootings and whatnot to be able to do either. We never know a motive, or if there's strong indication of motive, they bury it, whatever the reasoning being behind it. So if you look at the evidence, it's clear that these people are mentally ill and usually coaxed into it by one way or another. And we're going to talk about schizophrenia and stuff too as we get into this. Okay, so the FBI never determined why shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks wanted to kill Mr. Trump, who at the time was the former president running for a second term. The Bureau has not publicly shared the information on its investigation in more than 10 months. Why? Congress has also struggled to get details from federal law enforcement agency. Why? Isn't there no oversight? There's intelligence oversight, but there's no domestic oversight of intelligence. The reasoning being, and I'm going to get to more on Thomas Crooks in just saying, but first I need to say, is that there's never any motive that is even suggested by the FBI. And then what they do have is not shared. And then what's always presented is two differing accounts to confuse the people. People get so tired that they just stop caring about it. Fox News, who was Thomas Crooks? 1 year later, motive and missed warnings haunt Trump rally shooting. Shooter's motive still unclear despite extensive investigation into the attack and nearly changed American history. Crooks look not so much. Now, before I get into this, I just have to say, is this guy, Nance, is an ex-FBI. So who we're hearing from here is an ex-FBI and ex-Homeland Security people. Now listen to what they're talking about here. Crooks looked not so much like an ideologue, which he wasn't, not so much like, listen to the next phrase here, not so much like an individual who was being directed in some way to conduct an assassination attempt. Let me read that again. Not so much like an individual who is being directed in some way to conduct an assassination attempt. Directed in some way. Wind-up toy is what I'm suggesting all the time. But the guy, ex-FBI guy, is saying that's absolutely not what is happening. But more like a person with antisocial issues that may have been seeking notoriety. Again, goes all the way back to Sandy Hook. Come on, guys. The Sandy Hook guy was autistic. What did he care about notoriety? Oh, yeah, they're all want notoriety. Most people his age aren't even involved in politics. You do a man on the street and you talk to people between the ages of 18 and 25. They're concerned about a lot of other things than seeking notoriety by killing a political figure. Right? Because Crooks was said not to be much of an ideologue. Well, then why would you seek to assassinate a political figure? You're playing into the hands of ideologues for notoriety, perhaps. So this FBI guy sandwiches it between two misstatements. This guy is not antisocial. He's a loser. And I just mean not antisocial, but socially awkward. Isn't antisocial. The real thing is sandwiched in between. An individual who is being directed in some way to conduct an assassination attempt. He had several encrypted accounts that he was using while he was on the roof. So this former FBI agent, John Nance, said Crooks did not fit the profile of a politically motivated extremist. Well, why would you shoot the president if you're not politically motivated? Why would you stake out the venue? If, let's say, some guy just wandered into a crowd of people and shot a bunch of people, and one of them was a governor or something, maybe that wasn't politically motivated, but you're going to a political rally, but it's not politically motivated? Go back to the story. Crook's lack of friendships and high school classmates who said that Bethel Park, Pennsylvania native was bullied throughout high school. So this is perfect target of the online, I don't even know what to call them, the online sock puppets, the nefarious actors online. And if you've ever been online, whether you're playing games online or in chat groups, rooms, and what have you, and I don't frequent them that much, whether video games or chat rooms, but as soon as you're in there, it's like, hi, I want to be your friend. Happens over and over and over again. And I'm like, and I'm in like a chat room for 5 minutes, and I'm like, what? Or you're playing a video game, and hi, what's your... In any case, it goes on to say, one thing I thought was interesting, they said he didn't have friends. Is it interesting? It's interesting if you're targeting, you're finding these targets. And of course, they need to debunk conspiracy theories. And this is Guy Marino, is the guy from the DHS. That's the danger of lone wolves. According to the definition, they're not talking about this with anybody else, right? Right? Question mark? They're not sharing information about their plans. They're not talking about this with anybody else, right? And I hate when people do this. They affirm what they just said. It's a mind trick. So it's when people gaslight you, they look at you and they say, they're not talking with anybody else, right? How do we know? We don't know. I mean, the guy at Sandy Hook, he destroyed his computer, apparently, and wore a mask, even though he knew he was going into a suicide mission. They're not sharing information about their plans. The FBI and Secret Service have found no evidence of external direction or conspiracy. Well, isn't that nice? That makes it very convenient. I'm going to go to the map here. And people have seen this. Okay, 150-yard shot, which is pretty hard for a guy that didn't have a scope. They keep saying he had a scope. But when they showed the gun, and they showed pictures of the gun, and I saw evidence, what we're going to talk about in just a second, of evidence of damage to the gun. A gunshot hit the gun. I saw. We're going to get to the Washington Post in just a second. But we're looking at the map here. Sorry. Okay, what it doesn't show here is that Crooks was at the lower part of the roof where it says shooter location. And I've said this many times. So 150-yard shot with iron sights, that's a far shot. I'm not saying you can't do it, but if you had a scope, it's much easier depending on the magnification, etc. Okay, but he started on the lower end of the roof where everybody saw him. So when he got to the apex of the roof, there was a lot of stuff blocking his way. So which I said, you could never have made the shot from that. I said that before the video surfaced of him running across the roof. So he got up, and I said, because the amount of time it would have taken for him to start shooting from the other side of the roof, I said he would have had to have gotten up and run across the roof. And at that time, with counter snipers looking right at that roof, they didn't see him. But then miraculously, the video emerges that's showing him doing exactly just that. wasn't taken out by snipers, and was able to get back down in a prone position and start shooting. 8 shots before someone from a local team was supposedly in the middle of the field and took him out. I didn't know how you could get an angle from where they say he was. Now it's added another wrinkle that doesn't make sense. I thought the guy got up on the roof and shot at him. Washington Post says a different story. So he ran across the roof, wasn't taken out by snipers, got down in the prone position, took 8 shots at 150 yards with no scope, and scored a headshot. Doesn't make any sense. And had cell phones and explosives in the car and all this other rigmarole, this ridiculousness. All right, let's go to the next article, which is the Washington Post article. Okay, so he may have stopped Trump's would-be assassin. Now he's telling his story. The Butler County SWAT team operator standing in an open field between the gunman and the rally stage. I didn't know how he had a position to hit somebody prone at the apex of a roof and then hit the weapon, right? So let's go back to the story. Aligned the red dot of a scope with the shooter's chin and fired a single shot. So he's shooting with a red dot at 75 yards. Did the red dot have any magnification? We don't know. You know, if it was a Trigicon standard, you know, I think it's 3 magnification. All right, so this guy, Zalaponi, a 46-year-old Army combat veteran, is convinced that his round, which public officials have called the 9th shot, struck Crook's rifle and forced him to stop shooting. His belief that he cut short the assassination attempt has been echoed by Butler County District Attorney, the county SWAT team commander, and a congressman who investigated the day's events. All right. I know I'm belaboring this, but it's really important, and then I'm going to have to go fast through the other headlines today. In about an hour every day, I cover about 30 headlines, and I know it's a lot to digest, and sometimes I focus on certain things that need focusing on. But the reality is that, is he one of the snipers who were in the upper window that were covering the roof that would have seen Thomas Crooks climb on the roof and then be on the roof? Because they were in a window behind that building where Thomas Crooks was, right over where he would have climbed up. They would have seen him right there. But for some reason, the 2 local SWAT team snipers left their position there and purportedly got locked out of the building. To do what? Supposedly, as the story goes, that they got information that there was a person of interest wandering the grounds and that authorities have lost track of him. But let's go back to the Washington Post, which is CIA. So this is a CIA story they're trying to tell you. The FBI has found no forensic evidence that the 9th shot hit Crook's rifle. I saw the Crook's rifle, and it had damage to it around the magazine. But what would the FBI say? Of course not, because they washed down that roof so quickly. But if you saw the body cam footage, you could see Crooks there. You could see his rifle there. It was damaged. I didn't see a scope. Hey, I could be wrong. I didn't see a scope. If there was a scope on it, you know, maybe I'm remembering incorrectly. What is certain is that crooks who had additional ammunition and an AR-style rifle that was still operational never fired again. So that leads you to believe that he was incapacitated in some way, or his weapon malfunctioned, could have jammed. He doesn't know how to clear a jam. Zalaponi's shot was followed by a 10-second pause in gunfire that ended with a Secret Service counter sniper killed crooks. Oh. 10 seconds. Okay, so 9 shots, 10 seconds. Plus the 2 minutes of people pointing at a guy on the roof saying, hey, there's a guy on the roof. Then him running across the roof. The counter snipers didn't take a shot until he had done the deed. It's a fucking conspiracy. So it goes on to say that Zalaponi's account has been documented in closed-door interviews with congressional investigators, celebrated quietly within his SWAT team. You know, he's a big guy, and then it goes into that thing. The point is, where did I see that? Yeah, it said he stood in an open field. We can go back to the map here from the Fox News article. In the middle of an open field as part of, he was selected from the local SWAT team to be part of the counter assault, counter sniper team with DHS, the Secret Service. And he was where? Somewhere over here? Further? Way over here? At least 75 yards away. So he had to be in the field somewhere to take a shot. Maybe it was over here somewhere. Sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. I'm not saying, because what I understood it to be is that he climbed up on the roof and then shot. So now they're saying that's different. It's all confusing. Was he one of the snipers that was in that room? We don't know about those guys. The people that would have seen crooks climb up on the roof and be on the roof were not where they were supposed to be. And then the counter snipers didn't take him out as he ran across the roof. Fucking conspiracy. And he had encrypted text message apps on his phone, apparently that he was using while he was on the roof. Just a lone gunman. What would be the impetus of some lonely kid to take up this dirty deed? I think the FBI knows. The FBI knew something about the Whitmer kidnapping plot. All right, more. One American News, failed would-be Trump assassin Ryan Routh seeks to self-represent, dropping court-appointed federal public defenders. Now, this is something else from this. We know what happened with Ryan Routh, right? Okay, so supposedly snuck next to a fence near the Trump Mar-a-Lago golf course. Was it Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster? Mar-a-Lago, right? Mar-a-Lago golf course, where paparazzi often go to shoot Trump while he's golfing. Goes there, sets up early morning hours, has his car parked nearby. Now, here's the problem. That his car I'm not sure there's parking on that roadway right there. But according to a witness, a woman had noticed him in his vehicle suspiciously speeding away. Hold on a second, but then they go back, thus contacting authorities. The witness observed Routh running from the area and eventually jumping into a black Nissan Xterra. The information led law enforcement to issue a be on the lookout alert shortly after officers from the Martin County and Palm Beach County Sheriff's offices located and arrested Routh on Interstate 95. Okay, so how did she see this person? She saw him emerge from the bushes, and I don't think there's parking right there. I might be wrong, but I'm speculating. And then that's a busy roadway. Did she park there? She saw him come out of the thing and then jump into a vehicle. Apparently, she followed it for some distance and got the license plate. And we never know who this person is. When you don't name a source, even if it's a witness in a case, I mean, you can't name this witness in a case, but. So he chooses to represent himself. Why? Because he's a kook. He's going to portray himself as a kook. Good luck with that. He's kooky guy. He's intelligence. Maybe not an agent, but an asset. And investigative bodies and intelligence services know how to manipulate people psychologically. Whether they're witting or unwitting, it doesn't matter. That's what I mean is the FBI knows this too. Is because the FBI has turned in sort of the domestic CIA. They know how to find targets and manipulate them to do what they want. Whether it's to attack a school or to attack a president or whatever. It doesn't friggin' matter. They know how to do that and psychologically motivate people to do things. And it doesn't matter what their background is. They're just, you can see Ryan Routh is more of a witting asset to a greater conspiracy, a greater network. While Thomas Crooks fits the profile of a lonely young man looking for importance in this big world. You know, and so they feed on that. He doesn't just do it on his own. I mean, you have to be mad. And there is no indication from Thomas Crooks that he ever did anything violent to anybody. And so he was bullied at school. So that might work for a school shooter. He was bullied at school, so he went back to the school and he shot all the bullies. Yeah, well, that's what they say. But he didn't go to the school. He didn't hunt down his nemesis, the school bully, 5 years out of high school or whatever. He took out another bully, the biggest bully of them all, Donald Trump. It's just bullshit. All right. I went on and on and on for half an hour on that. Next headline from Post Millennial. Jasmine Crockett claims Trump assassination attempts were done by MAGA Trump supporters. Crockett's comments come despite law enforcement and federal investigators still not identifying a motive for the July 13th assassination attempt in Butler. Really? Jasmine Crockett made a series of claims on a podcast released Tuesday telling comedian Hassan Minhaj that recent acts of the political violence, including assassination attempts against Donald Trump, were committed by Trump supporters, and such violence doesn't come from Democrats. Well, I'm not really going to get too much into that. Obviously, anyone can be a criminal. It is MAGA. It is specifically MAGA faction. I don't think traditional Republicans are getting engaged of all this, but it's MAGA. We've heard this time and time again. So this is gaslighting. This is actually military-style gaslighting propaganda. And it's not for Trump supporters, obviously, because they're not watching Hassan Minhaj. It's all leftist liberals who, she doesn't look square into the camera, but she says straight out, it's only MAGA that does this. When all the evidence shows throughout history that it's radicals, leftist radicals, that are the most to blame for political violence. Without a doubt. Go ahead. You can do case for case, and you'll get a few people on the right. Most of the things are contrived. They go to the Oklahoma City bombing and, it's right-wing militia, and they try to play this whole thing up. And that was another fake. It wasn't a fake bombing, but the guy that was supposedly involved and then his accomplice, who was never really found to be, and the strange thing with Elohim City, and they're trying to tie it to, come on. Come on. But in any case, you want to do a case by case, feel free. Just in this year alone, the amount of attacks by left wing, and there's going to be more coming, and apparently at Alligator Alley. Alcatraz. All right. National Review, Trump administration launches investigation into Minnesota for alleged hiring discrimination. That's right. The hiring justification policy in Minnesota instructs supervisors at the Department of Human Services to provide a reason why they might seek to hire a candidate from a non-underrepresented background to fill a vacancy. So, in other words, that's code, non-underrepresented background, which means male and white. Racial minorities or various backgrounds and women fall into the unrepresented category. So they just use coded language. Supervisors at the agency may be subject to disciplinary action if they do not comply with the policy. So they have to provide a written reason why they're not selecting from the underrepresented category. Justice Department believes the hiring policies might be part of a broader pattern of employment practices by the state of Minnesota designed to fulfill certain quotas. Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act makes it illegal for employers to discriminate against people based on certain demographic characteristics. It spells out what those are, but you can see that it's anything. So if it's color, Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act makes it illegal for employees to discriminate against people based on certain demographic characteristics. You're black, specifically, it was about being black, woman, Hispanic, whatever. But the point is that the liberals in their mind has codified that as non-white, underrepresented. See how they use the coded language? Underrepresented. So if Asians are represented, then they don't count. If white males are represented, they don't count. Or if Hispanics are well represented, then they don't count. It's only trying to get people that are underrepresented, and I don't even know what that means. Does that have to match the population demographics? They don't even say. They just say, oh, we need more black people in here. So let's get a Supreme Court justice a female black Supreme Court justice to fill a quota when she's not qualified, obviously. All right, more on white hate. And I really don't cover this too much because it's another technical difficulty. Geez, big surprise. The jury found, Fox News reports, and this is kind of an old case, but I want to get into it anyway. Native Hawaiian man could face longer prison sentence after conviction for hate crime against a white man. Kwaulana Alokoahani, that's not right, Koanahi, was sentenced by a Honolulu judge in 2023 to 6.5 years after a jury found him and another man guilty of a hate crime against a white man because it was hate. The jury found that the pair to be motivated by race when they punched, kicked, and used a shovel to beat Christopher Kunzelman in 2014 for attempting to move into the remote village in Maui. So we live in the United States, so if Somalis or Muslims can settle in what was a predominantly white town and take it over, then one white guy could go to a remote village within the United States and buy a house there, legally buy a house, and he's not committing any crime or He's not using it to traffic children or to, cook heroin or do whatever illegal things there. He just wanted to move there from Arizona with his wife, who was recently diagnosed, I think, with multiple sclerosis. And he got beaten up by locals. I didn't include the rest of that text there, so. The point of the matter here being is that discriminatory violence, which I guess you want to call it hate crime, is everywhere and is growing against whites, specifically because whites in the public consciousness white males particularly, have been marginalized for years now. And it's part of a broader effort to weaken the United States. All this shit about white supremacy, all these fringe theories is a bunch of bullshit. The fact that the former president of the United States stood on stage and called white supremacy the biggest domestic terror risk it's not true. They have to coax people into doing these crimes that aren't very prevalent at all for them to make the news whatsoever. More news from the New York Post. Largest U.S. teachers union mocked for misspelling fascism and anti-Trump agenda item, too rich for parody. It was actually a typo. It said against Trump's embrace of fascism by using the term fascism, and they misspelled it. What do you want? Stupid friggin' teachers that don't use spell check. I mean, it's not that big a story. I just think it's ironic. That's all. Post-millennial ICE arrest 11 illegal immigrants. Sex offenders, pedophile in Minneapolis. Ooh, where's that? That is Minnesota. Hey, Tim Walz. These pedophiles and sex offenders are sickos, and our brave ICE law enforcement are putting their lives on the line to arrest and remove them from American communities. Again, illegal immigrant criminals, mostly from Laos. I think one was from Thailand. So you could see here. Halo Angelo Vang of Laos. They were mostly from Laos. Next headline, PJ Media. ICE arrests terrorists from 100 most wanted list. That's the FBI 100 most wanted list. Murderer's name has not yet been released. But on July 9th, ICE press release stated that he entered the United States illegally and is wanted back in his home country of El Salvador for aggravated homicide of 5 victims, attempted aggravated homicide, deprivation of liberty, it's kidnapping, and terrorist organization affiliation, because it's more than likely he was MS-13. It is El Salvador. More from the Post-Millennial. Wanted FBI manhunt underway for armed Antifa suspect allegedly involved in ambush in shooting outside ICE detention center in Texas. Benjamin Hanil Song, 32 of Dallas, is wanted for attempted murder and considered armed and dangerous. So apparently, he was the guy. He was the guy that got all the weapons for this gang of people who that attacked this ICE detention facility and then shot some ICE officers and then tried to get away, and, poorly trained, don't really understand what killing is all about. And then they fail at the last minute. I mean, one guy got shot in the neck, but apparently the others shot over 20 rounds, didn't hit anything. PJ Media, Hispanic voter support for deportations increasing. Newsweek reports the Trump administration's deportation efforts is increasing among Hispanic voters. The support is. The outlet cites Signal poll of 1,500 conducted between July 1st and 2nd. The poll shows an 11% increase among Hispanic voters for deportation. Specifically, 50% of Hispanic voters supported deportations, with 11% saying they strongly supported them, 48% opposed them. That's what it shows. One American News is reporting John Kerry admits Trump was right about the border. Without a protected border, you don't have a nation. Thanks, John Kerry. But there's still climate change. Karen Bass, Post-Millennial, is reporting that Karen Bass says anti-ICE riots that were reported never happened. Well, let me just say that the riots that were reported never happened. When asked a question by a reporter about the riots as well as increased violence against ICE agents, Bass responded, well, let me just say that the riots that were reported never happened. Fucking delusional. That's what they just delay, deny, defend. One American News, Starmer and Macron agreeing on deal aiming at reduce illegal immigration. So Starmer is the Prime Minister of England. That's the first minister to the Queen. And President Macron, because France is a republic, it's like America, as a president. So he is the president of France. Agree on a deal aiming to reduce illegal immigration. So you have John Kerry saying Trump is right with illegal immigration. And now, since the liberals are losing on this issue, they're all taking a different tack now. Also, if you look at European countries, the crime rate of involving this shit, involving illegal immigration, is huge. Real Clear Politics, both Kevins will end the Fed's deep state. Now, what is this about? This is talking about Kevin Hassett and another Kevin that is Trump's pick for the deep state, to head up the Fed. And this is written by Larry Kudlow. In other words, the Fed has to be cleansed of its deep state dislike of all things Donald Trump and, frankly, its deep state bureaucratic groupthink of deadwood economists with models that haven't worked in 50 years, indeed. Who are now advising Chairman Jay Powell to fight Mr. Trump and his economic growth agenda. The next Fed chairman has to go toe-to-toe with the hundreds of Fed economists who are spurring Mr. Powell on his fight against Mr. Trump's tariff and reciprocity fair trade policies, also against Mr. Trump's tax cuts policies. Before I go into this Zero Hedge article, I just have to say, I thought I had the other name of the other person that Trump wants to replace Jay Powell with. But Kudlow is right, is that the Fed, well, everybody works against Trump, but the Fed is working against Trump because Jerome Powell should have cut rates 2 months ago and will not do so unless the target 2% inflation is met or goes under. And then they're working with the Bureau of Statistics, the Labor Board, to fudge around with the numbers to make sure inflation doesn't go below 2, at least as long as possible. All right, Zero Hedge. Texas greenlights gold and silver as legal tender, which is great. And this basically has to do with specific gold, which means it's probably designated gold, certified gold, 99% 9 pure or whatever. Specie gold that can be used as legal tender. I think all states should do this. I think this should be a nationwide thing. God forbid anything happens and we don't have electricity. You know, you're going to spend your Federal Reserve notes, but then it would be legal, so they can't seize your gold to purchase things with gold. Just the news, fighting against Chinese cyber espionage. FBI hunts down members of Chinese hacking networks. If you didn't hear about this, there were 2 guys arrested. One guy was arrested in Italy. He was charged in absentia by the FBI, and then he was tracked down. And I don't want to go over that he was hacking into COVID-19 to get research. They already had samples. They really didn't need to do this, but like I said, we're completely infiltrated by the Chinese communists. People hate to hear me keep talking about this, but it's true. They're everywhere. God forbid we ever get into a war with them. It's going to be very, very difficult. There would definitely have to be an effort, an unconstitutional effort, mind you, like that happened in the Second World War. The most important thing is China delivered a sharp criticism of Zhu's arrest in a statement and said Beijing completely rejects any smears and vilification about alleged cyber activities. China firmly opposes the use of long-arm jurisdiction and opposes the U.S. disguised extradition of Chinese nationals via a third country. The Justice Department alleges Zhu was a general manager at China-based Shanghai Power Rock Network, which the department says conducts cyber hacking operations in the direction of Shanghai State Security Bureau, a subsidiary of Chinese Ministry of State Security, the chief intelligence agency. They're working with, all the Chinese are required to work for the Communist Party, engaging in surveillance and espionage, period. And then I have something here, Krebs on security. I'm not going to quote Chris Krebs. But it shows the scope of exactly what they're doing. I will show this, though. In late 2015, the Obama administration and the PRC came to an agreement that intended to prevent cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property, including trade secrets, how about state secrets, or other confidential business information and commercial advantage. It didn't work. And still, like state secrets, like Joe Biden took state classified information, put it in his garage, and then his Chinese gardener would go into the garage and look at it. Same thing that happened at University of Pennsylvania, I believe, was it UPenn? Where the Biden wing or whatever had a closet full of classified documents that Chinese state officials had keys to because they donated to the college. One America News and some separate news. Romania set to acquire Iron Dome for NATO Eastern Front defense. Romania will be the kickoff for the Third World War with Russia. You'll see what happens there. They're going to get Iron Dome. There'll be some drone attack or something, supposedly, from Russia. They'll shoot down the drones. It'll be a big international crisis. But that'll give NATO the go-ahead to furthermore increase support for Ukraine, but then get directly involved in the war. Some text from this article. Roger Hilton, the defense research fellow at the Slovakia-based think tank Globsec, told the outlet that since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the country has experienced numerous airspace incursions, highlighting the need for a stronger blah, 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 blah. I have to say here, though, but you know what happened in Romania, right? The global deep state, they elected an anti-war president, and the global deep state and the European Union said, nope. Election doesn't count. Sorry. Redo. And then they elected another populist anti-war guy, the next in charge, and next step down from the guy that was barred from elections. And then again, they said, no. It's too close to call. We have to have a runoff. And then amazingly in the runoff, the anti-war guy lost. So we all know Romania will be the kickoff. The Iron Dome aspect will have something to do with the crisis involving Russia. And as to what's going on with Russia, I don't approve of what they're doing, but you have to understand is that their spies are being fed certain information, and they're being told certain information that leads them to believe that Trump's application for peace is just doing so to undermine Russia's advances. And so they're not going along with it, which is also, it's a counter-espionage. Back to the home front, though, from the Observer, sovereign is a fire alarm for America's most dangerous family values. Nick Offerman plays a sovereign citizen in this violent, unsettling thriller about fatherhood, fear, and collapse. The middle-aged star Nick Offerman is a dangerous gun-toting redneck who feels so cheated and betrayed by his life that he becomes a chief spokesman for the growing sovereign citizens movement, an anti-government, anti-establishment system of right-wing radicals. Right-wing radicals, it doesn't make sense. Whose actions are motivated by relentless distrust of authority. How convenient is that? So this is the third installment of domestic propaganda for civil war. The first one was the Obama film, Leave the World Behind, or whatever it was called. I always forget the title. The next one was Civil War, which came out. And this one, Sovereign, which again puts forth the sovereign citizen notion that people that claim that they have rights, you know, are somehow are part of this anti-government right-wing fringe movement. It's all a bunch of bullshit. You do have sovereignty, you have individual sovereignty. It's a thing. Now, are you a sovereign citizen and you don't have to obey federal or laws or whatever? That's not true. But that's a psyop used to convince you or convince people that if you claim you have sovereignty as an individual, that somehow you're part of the sovereign citizens movement, you're a crazy right-wing radical, which isn't a right-wing radical. It's a it's a Freudian slip there. It's a right-wing reactionary because you're reacting to things. You're reacting to radical action or ideas or whatever. Right-wing people are reactionary. They're not radical because they don't come up with these progressive ideas. That's what makes you a radical. So and then even Merriam-Webster had to change the definition and said, well, radical could be right-wing. Just quickly from the UK Times, Namaste Fascist, the racist history of yoga. And this is just more propaganda, taking aim at anything that's bougie, you know, because you're going to have this communist revolution in the United States. And so you're going after bougie Karens who walk around their yoga pants. Harvard explores a new center for conservative scholarship amid Trump attacks. The Ivy League school has discussed an effort to support a viewpoint diversity with political donors. Said it will not be partisan. Well, what the fuck is that? What's the point of having a new center for conservative scholarship if it's not partisan? Fucking ridiculous. Their left-wing shit can be partisan, but the right-wing shit can't be partisan. It's got to be bipartisan. Stupid. Are they bowing to pressure? I think all schools should be forced to have diversity in political ideology. All right, we're over an hour, so I'm going to speed through this. So Camp Mystic Cabin stood in an extremely hazardous floodway. I'll show you a map. They're in the floodplain. I said this many times before, that first of all, this is part of the idea that this was a contrived attack. I think they had this on the shelf as part of their global climate change, global warming, increasing disasters to kill a bunch of kids and either point to global warming, but in this instance, they used it to sully Trump and say it's because of Trump. But I think they had this in the hopper for some time, create a supercell up in the hills and produce what you need 5, 6, 10 inches of rain, or stir a hurricane. I guess it was part of a tropical storm. You stir the hurricane using lasers, and then you get it to stay over a certain area, dump a bunch of rain, much like what was done in North Carolina, which before a decade ago never happened with hurricanes. Hurricanes didn't just stop and sit someplace for a day and then have this happen, because much like Katrina, and we talked yesterday about the levees around New Orleans and how the Ninth Ward was full of shit, and they wanted to clear out the shit so they could build more expensive homes there. They had this in the hopper and they saved it, but they used it, they brought it out, and then they had to create other flash floods to make it seem like it wasn't such a weird kind of a weird event. It was a weird event because of this. And the news went right to Mystic Camp. Right to it. We barely had reports of the flash flooding. And the first reports were, a girls' Christian camp. This is the first reports. Hundreds died. But they're not all from the camp. But we went immediately to the kid camp because they knew that if they cause a flash flood in this place, that immediately, just like you do with Syria or Gaza or whatever, look, dead babies, and everybody cries, and they got to blame somebody. So they blame, maybe rightfully so, Netanyahu, but in this, they were trying to blame Trump. But again, just like their Minnesota political hit list guy, Bolter, it fell flat. So I believe because there's a girls' Christian camp in a floodway, this place was prone to flash flooding. Not too hard to create. You just have to steer a tropical storm or a supercell or whatever through weather modification. Not saying that's what happened. I'm not even speculating. I'm saying it's possible. New York Times reports some of Iran's enriched uranium survived attacks, Israeli officials say. The assessment came as experts are trying to determine how long it would take for Iran to build it. We knew they were, that's why Trump struck on Saturday. After he said on Thursday, I'll wait 2 weeks and then strike. As soon as he made that threat, they started getting trucks there and removing the uranium, the enriched uranium. And they saw the trucks there, so they go, if you're going to make a difference, you got to strike tonight. So we knew some was taken out at the very least. Just the news. Alan Dershowitz claims he's seen the Epstein files docs suppressed to protect the elites. I know the names of the people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them, and that's wrong. Yeah, documents are being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them, but I'm bound by confidentiality. Really? Because you're on the list, dude. Virginia Giuffre recanted her accusations against Dershowitz prior to her death and settled the case. And that's what I'm talking about her. Her death set forth what's happening now with Epstein. She was the most prominent witness who was pushing the case along, and with her death, they're able to say case closed. Quickly now, daughter of New Jersey police chief accuses him and others of ritualistic abuse, years of sexual assault, and if you didn't know what happened here, so she's trying to say that here, her father, a police chief, just like what happened in England, and their neighbor were using satanic child sex rituals, and they maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but it was her suppressed memories were brought out by therapy or something. So I'm not giving any validity to this case. I'm just saying that this is what she's reporting, and it has to do with child sex trafficking, so it doesn't. To me, it's there. It could be happening. Just the news. In the era of skepticism, FDA clears Moderna COVID vaccine for some kids up to 11 years old. Clearing it isn't a recommendation. You could clear all the drugs you want as long as people have a choice whether to take it or not and not suffer repercussions. It's fine. Got more steer. I don't really quote the Daily Star. Fabled 60s fabled 60s folk rock band that took charts by storm, outed as AI generated group. The Velvet Sundown boasts 1.1 million monthly Spotify listeners. It's AI's taken over. Daily Mail jobs apocalypse spreads as another industry titan slashes over thousands of roles. What is he saying? 1,300 people will lose their jobs to computers, replaced with AI. Indeed CEO Hayasuka Deko Adakoba says AI is changing the world. Told you. You can't make this shit up. Thanks for we went over, I think. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share today's episode. Share the channel. Engage the channel. Like, subscribe. Leave a comment. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today. Yeah, we're over by like 10 minutes. So thanks for joining me and sticking with me. Stay hip to the trick. Remember, you're under attack psychologically, biologically. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. I appreciate you. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
I'm an American. I have rights.